Victor Rhodes gave me 30 days and made it sound like a clean breakup. 30 days, he said, sliding the contract across the conference table. At 5 o'clock on the 30th, neither of us owes the other anything. I looked down at the signature line, then back at him. You really know how to welcome a contractor. One corner of his mouth moved. Victor had always been careful with smiles, as if he preferred to spend them only when they would do damage. I'm trying to make sure temporary doesn't mean disposable. That landed harder than it should have. 11 months earlier, I had been one of 43 people removed from a national agency during a restructuring meeting that lasted 12 minutes. My manager had told me my work was excellent, my reviews were excellent, and the decision had nothing to do with performance. Then IT disabled my badge before I got back to my desk. Since then, I had become very good at telling people I preferred contract work. Freedom, variety, no office politics. All true, technically. A lie can be made almost entirely from true pieces. I signed. Victor took the contract back without looking triumphant, which helped. He was 46 years older than me, and for most of the 12 years I had known him, he had existed in my head as Jamie's older brother, rather than a person I was allowed to study too closely. He was the guy who picked Jamie and me up when our car died outside Richmond. The guy who could find a restaurant for 8 people without a reservation. The guy who arrived late to birthday dinners because of work, and somehow still remembered who hated olives. Now he sat across from me in a dark blue shirt, with the sleeves rolled once, asking whether I preferred Slack or email for decisions that needed a paper trail. It was deeply inconvenient to discover that Jamie's older brother had become attractive, while I wasn't paying attention. Victor walked me through Northline's campaign in 17 minutes. Outdoor lifestyle brand. National product launch. Good creative. Bad coordination. Their senior producer had quit, with 5 weeks left, which was why Jamie had sent Victor my portfolio, with a message that apparently read, "He's annoying, but he can fix this." That sounds like him, I said. Victor closed the deck. For the record, Jamie got me to look. Your work got you hired. I kept my expression neutral. You say that to all your little brother's unemployed friends. You're not unemployed. Freelance is unemployed with invoices. That's not what your tax return says. I stared at him. He lifted one shoulder. Jamie talks. There it is. Nepotism. Jamie also told me you once made a client cry because they changed a headline after final approval. They cried because the new headline was bad. Victor smiled properly then. It changed his whole face, which felt unfair. Before I could decide what to do with that, he stood. Come on. You've got a meeting in 6 minutes. My meeting? You own the launch now. That was the first thing he did that made me nervous. Not giving me work, giving me authority. The campaign team was already in the project room when we arrived. Design, copy, media, retail, analytics, and a permanent brand manager named Paige, who looked at me the way people look at temporary replacements they expect to disappear before remembering everyone's names. Victor introduced me in one sentence. Beckett Lawrence is running launch production through Close. Paige folded her arms. We've already finalized the retail sequence. I saw that. And I think it puts the highest risk deliverable last. The room went quiet with impressive efficiency. Paige looked at Victor instead of me. We agreed on the sequence Tuesday. Victor didn't answer for me. He looked at me. Show us. So I did. I pulled up the schedule, moved 3 dependencies, showed where the retail photography could slip, showed what happened to paid media if it did, and explained the part nobody had wanted to say out loud. They had built a launch calendar around the assumption that nothing would go wrong. Something always went wrong. Paige challenged 2 dates. She was right about one. I changed it. She pushed on the other. I didn't. By the end, the plan was 4 days less elegant and approximately 40% more survivable. Paige turned to Victor again. This isn't the plan you approved. Victor studied the screen. No, he said. It's better. Then he looked around the room. If Beckett owns the launch, he gets to make the call. Nobody argued after that. I had worked for men who loved hiring experts and hated being disagreed with by them. Victor, apparently, was not one of those men. That should not have been romantic information. My brain filed it there anyway. The rest of the day moved fast. Victor checked in twice, both times with actual questions instead of disguised instructions. At 4:48, I realized I had gone nearly 9 hours without wondering whether someone regretted hiring me. That was unusual enough that I noticed. I claimed one wall of the project room and wrote 3 headings across the whiteboard. Done. Not done. Tomorrow. It was an old habit from agency life. At the end of a day, I moved every loose problem into one of 3 categories, so my brain would stop trying to solve all of them in bed at 2 in the morning. I was halfway through not done when Victor appeared in the doorway. Is this a ritual? It's medical treatment. For what? Employment. He stepped inside. I pointed at the board with the marker. Done is proof the day wasn't wasted. Not done is a controlled environment for shame. Tomorrow is where I put everything I'm emotionally unprepared to deal with. Very healthy. I freelance. We have no benefits. He studied the board, then took the marker from my hand. His fingers brushed mine for maybe half a second. It meant nothing. My body, apparently under poor management, recorded the event separately. Victor added client approval under not done. That's waiting on them, I said. Still not done. You're going to be unbearable for 30 days, aren't you? 29 and a half. I checked the wall clock. You can leave, you know. I know. He stayed. For the next 10 minutes, we went through the board. He told me where Northline usually lost time. I told him which meetings I intended to cancel. He disagreed with one. I made him defend it. He did. There was no flirting, at least nothing I could submit as evidence, but the office slowly emptied beyond the glass walls, and Victor remained after every professional reason for him to stay had ended. When I capped the marker, he asked, "What do you need from me tomorrow?" Permission to annoy 3 department heads. You already have it. Budget authority. Within the launch allocation. Yes. Someone to stop Jamie from asking whether I've embarrassed him yet. That one's beyond my role. I laughed. Victor glanced at the board. You always do this? Every project? Even when you're working alone? Especially then. He nodded as though I had told him something more personal than I intended. That bothered me enough to make me reach for my laptop bag. Victor walked with me to the elevators. For a man I had known for years, there were suddenly too many things I didn't know about him. How he behaved when nobody needed him to be Jamie's brother, whether he always listened that closely, whether his voice was naturally lower at the end of a long day, or whether I had simply never stood near him at 5:12 in an almost empty office. The elevator arrived. Victor held the door while I stepped inside. Good first day. Careful. I'll start expecting praise. I said good. Don't get greedy. The doors started to close. Victor put a hand against them. One thing. I waited. What are you doing after day 30? I almost made a joke. That was usually how I handled questions with no safe answer. Another client, maybe. Another contract. Chicago if a former coworker's startup got funding. Nowhere for a while. I had options. I always made sure I had options. But Victor was still standing between the elevator doors, waiting like the question deserved a real answer. For the first time in 11 months, I realized I had become very good at planning exits without ever deciding where I wanted to go next. I don't know. Something shifted in his expression. Not satisfaction, not concern, recognition. Then he stepped back and let the doors close. By the 4th day, I had stopped thinking of him as Jamie's older brother. That was probably the first mistake. The second was noticing exactly when he entered the project room each afternoon, usually 4:52, sometimes 4:57 if somebody trapped him in a meeting. Once, 4:43, which made me look at the clock before I looked at him. He caught me, checking whether I'm early, checking whether time still works, and unclear. The ritual acquired rules without either of us discussing them, I wrote. Victor challenged anything too vague. We stopped talking about work when the board was finished, but neither of us acknowledged that those extra minutes existed. On Thursday, he asked what I was doing that weekend. Recovering from you. That sounds expensive. I have a coupon. He asked where I lived now. I told him. Do you like the neighborhood? Enough. He held my gaze for a second. Everything with you is enough. I turned back to the whiteboard. That sounded almost judgmental. Observation. Worse. He let me avoid the question. That was another thing I learned about Victor. He never forced a personal answer. He simply made it obvious when I had dodged one. At work, things were going annoyingly well. The revised retail schedule held. Paid media stopped panicking. Paige and I developed a working relationship based on mutual respect and a shared belief that unnecessary meetings were a moral failure. Victor mostly stayed out of my way. When he did intervene, it mattered. On day 7, Northline's vice president wanted to add a new product story 10 days before creative lock. Victor brought the request to me privately instead of approving it above my head. What do you think? I think executives become creatively ambitious when they aren't responsible for deadlines. That's not an answer I can repeat. You can, if you want a memorable career. Try again. I showed him the production impact. He asked whether there was any version I could support. There's a version I can make happen. That's not what I asked. I looked up. Victor wasn't testing me. He was actually asking. No, I don't think it improves the campaign enough to justify the risk. Okay, that was it. At the executive review, Victor said no, not, Beckett thinks no, not, production has concerns. Just no. Afterward, I followed him into the hallway. You didn't blame me. He glanced sideways. Was I supposed to? It's a traditional management technique. I hired you to make production decisions. You also hired me temporarily. Temporary people make excellent shields. Victor stopped walking. The hallway was empty. You really expect that, don't you? Expect what? That temporary means less entitled to be defended. I expect temporary to mean temporary. That isn't the same sentence. Before I could answer, someone called Victor's name from across the floor. He held my eyes another second, then went. That evening I added executive change request under done with unnecessary aggression. Victor arrived at 4:54. He read the board. You survived. Barely. You were right. I'm going to need that in writing. He took the marker and added something under tomorrow. Try not to become insufferable. I stared at it. You're vandalizing a professional system. You'll recover. I should report you. To whom? I hated how easily he made me laugh. I hated more that I had started wondering what 30 days might become if the launch went well enough. Northline had no shortage of work. Victor trusted me. Paige had mentioned the previous producer role had never been formally replaced. I knew better than to build a future out of circumstantial evidence. I did it anyway. By day 10, the thought had become respectable enough to call a possibility. A permanent role. Raleigh. Work I liked. A boss who gave me authority. And Victor, arriving at 4:50-something, every afternoon for 10 minutes he did not need. I told myself that last part had nothing to do with the rest. Then Victor ruined the theory. He closed the budget sheet during an afternoon check-in. I want to talk about what happens after the contract. My body reacted before my face did. Something warm and stupid moved through me. I leaned back, trying to look casual. Already planning how to survive without me? Northline isn't going to offer you a permanent position. The warmth disappeared. Oh, Victor kept talking. Head count, budget structure, role classification, no senior opening. I nodded at the correct intervals, because competent adults do not visibly collapse when someone says exactly what they should have expected. Understood. Victor stopped. You're doing that thing. What thing? Where you become professionally pleasant. I'm always professionally pleasant. No, you're usually professionally argumentative. I'm growing. Beckett. I closed the laptop. It's fine. 30 days. We agreed. Yes. Neither of us owes the other anything. His own sentence sounded uglier when I gave it back to him. That's not why I'm telling you. Then why? Because you're operating above the role we had. That sounds suspiciously like a compliment delivered immediately after rejection. It's not a rejection. It has excellent timing. Victor exhaled, reached into a folder, and put a job description between us. I didn't touch it. What's this? Senior Integrated Production Lead, Hartwell Outdoor Group. I recognized the company. Everyone in our industry did. Bigger than Northline. Better funded. Multiple national brands. The role was in Atlanta. I read the first paragraph. Then the salary range. Then I looked at him. You're firing me into another state. Your contract is ending. In 20 days. Yes. You planned my next job before I finished this one. I saw the opening Monday. Monday meant he had been thinking about me after work. Not the way I wanted, apparently. I pushed the paper toward him. I didn't ask you to find me a job. I know. That usually matters to you. It does. Then why are we having this conversation? For the first time since I started at Northline, Victor looked uncertain. A pause. his thumb rubbing once along the folder edge. Because I think you should know when a door is open. That sounded rehearsed. It wasn't. Worse. I looked back at the description. Permanent, senior, real authority. The kind of role I would have applied for 2 years earlier without hesitation. Before getting laid off had taught me that permanent was often just temporary, with better stationery. Victor said, I haven't sent them anything. I looked up. I know the VP who oversees the team. I told her I might know someone, that's all. You discussed me? I asked whether the role was still open. I didn't give your name. That mattered. Annoyingly. If you say no, it stops here. I studied him. You want me to leave? His expression changed, very slightly. Enough that I knew I had asked the wrong question, in exactly the right way. I want you to have the option. That isn't what I asked. I know. The silence stretched. Victor could have answered. He didn't. Eventually, I picked up the description and folded it once. Send them my portfolio. His shoulders loosened. Not much, but I saw it. You look pleased. I think they should meet you. Right. I stood. Victor stayed seated. Beckett. I looked at him. This isn't me getting rid of you. I wanted to ask what it was instead. I didn't. That afternoon, the last 10 minutes felt different. I wrote done, not done, then stopped before tomorrow. Victor arrived and noticed immediately. You forgot one. No. I uncapped the marker and wrote it. Tomorrow. Underneath, send portfolio to Atlanta. For once, Victor didn't make a joke. The next morning my phone vibrated at 9:17. Hartwell Outdoor Group. They wanted an interview. I read the message twice before looking through the glass wall toward Victor's office. He was already watching me. I lifted the phone. Victor smiled. Not politely. Not carefully. He looked genuinely happy for me. And sitting there with an interview I should have wanted, I discovered that some small, unreasonable part of me had been hoping he wouldn't be. Victor helped me prepare, like a man training his replacement. That was unfair. I wasn't his permanent employee. Hartwell wasn't replacing anything at Northline. Still, by the time he spent 40 minutes making me explain why I had left my last agency without using the word restructuring 7 times, I was annoyed enough to resent his competence. You're making this worse. I'm making you stop answering questions, like someone cross-examined you. They might enjoy the drama. They're hiring a senior production lead, not a defendant. I closed my notes. Victor glanced at them. You do know you're good at this. At interviews? At the job. That sounded dangerously supportive. You'll survive. It was after 6. The office had emptied around us, but neither of us acknowledged that we were long past the last 10 minutes. My interview was the next morning. Victor had stayed because he knew the woman leading it. I told myself that was all. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you actually want me to get this job? Victor met my eyes. Yes. Immediate. Clean. Correct. I hated it. You didn't even pretend to struggle. Would you prefer dishonesty? Briefly. He laughed quietly. I didn't. He noticed. Of course he did. You don't have to take it because I made the introduction. I know. You don't owe me anything. That line again. He went still. I regretted saying it, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. A contract should probably stay in its lane, he said. I smiled despite myself. That sounded like a warning. Maybe it was. And finally there was something I could not file under professional mentorship. The next morning, Hartwell interviewed me for 73 minutes. Their vice president, Morgan Ellis, was sharp in a way I liked. She interrupted bad answers, asked specific questions, wanted to know why I had changed Northline's production sequence, not simply how. Halfway through, I forgot Victor had referred me. By the end, I wanted the job enough to become angry about wanting it. Morgan said they had 2 other candidates. I thanked her. Then she said, Victor was right about you. What exactly did he say? She smiled. That you make complicated projects easier to tell the truth about. I had no response. After the call, I sat staring at my laptop for a full minute. Then I walked to Victor's office. His door was open. How did it go? You described me. That tends to happen during referrals. You told her I make projects tell the truth. I said easier to tell the truth about. That's worse. Why? Because it sounds like you've been paying attention. I have. The answer settled between us. No joke. No retreat. I crossed my arms. You're getting reckless. With what? Leaving sentences unfinished. Victor stood slowly. There was no desk between us now. Beckett, I'm trying to be careful. About what? The first direct question. He could have answered. The hallway was empty. No Jamie. No team. No practical interruption waiting to rescue us. Victor held my gaze for a long moment. About not confusing your next decision with mine. I laughed quietly. That's extremely frustrating. I know. He stepped back first. I hated him for it. I respected him for it. Those reactions were becoming difficult to separate. That evening, he found me at the whiteboard. Under tomorrow, he added, stop pretending freelancing is a personality trait. I stared at it. You can't just write emotional sabotage under tomorrow. You're welcome to erase it. I didn't. Instead, I asked, why does this bother you? What? That I freelance. It doesn't. You bring it up a lot. Victor folded his arms. I think you use it to avoid admitting when you want permanence. That is wildly inappropriate workplace feedback. You're off the clock. Convenient. You asked. I looked at the board. I like flexibility. I believe you. I like not having one company own my life. Also believable. I like knowing I can leave. Victor's expression changed. There what? That one. I put the marker down. My last agency laid me off before lunch and told me not to take it personally. I remember. Jamie told you? No. I looked at him. You told me. When? His birthday last year. I searched my memory. Too much bourbon. Too many people in Jamie's backyard. Me making jokes about corporate loyalty, while Victor stood beside the grill. I had forgotten the conversation. He hadn't. Victor said, you told me the worst part wasn't losing the job. It was realizing how much of your life had been built around a place that could remove you in 12 minutes. That sounds depressingly like me. It was. And you remembered. Yes. The room seemed quieter. I reached for the marker just to do something with my hands. What did you learn from your last relationship? Victor didn't deflect. He walked to the window. We were together 8 years. I waited. He changed jobs twice during that time. Once because mine required travel. Once because we talked about moving and his commute would have been impossible. You asked him to? Not exactly. That answer carried weight. When we broke up, he told me he didn't know anymore which choices he'd made because he wanted them and which ones he'd made because I was easier to organize around. That's brutal. It was accurate. Was it? Victor turned. Accurate enough. I understood something then. Not everything, but enough. Victor wasn't helping me leave because he didn't care. He was helping me leave because caring made him suspicious of his own influence. Somehow, that hurt more. 2 days later, Hartwell requested a final interview. That same afternoon, Northline finished the hardest production phase early. At 4:50, the whiteboard held nothing under not done. Victor arrived at 4:53. I don't know what we do now, I said. Celebrate? Professionally? No. That answer surprised both of us. I capped the marker. So, what do we do with the 10 minutes when there's nothing left to fix? Victor looked at the clock. Apparently, we find out whether we can have a conversation without pretending it's work. We left the building. Downtown Raleigh still held the day's heat. We walked without deciding where we were going. After a block, Victor asked, what happens if Hartwell offers you the job? I panic efficiently. After that, I make a spreadsheet. Of course. Cost of living, salary, moving, travel back here. His attention caught on the last phrase. I kept walking. And then, I decide. Victor was quiet. I said, what would you do if somebody asked you to stay? His pace changed slightly. I'd want to know whether staying was actually what I wanted. That's not what I asked. I know. We stopped at a red light. The unfinished answer stood between us. For once, I didn't rescue him from it. Near the end of the contract, HR confirmed my access would expire Friday at 5. Victor formally transferred every approval away from himself. At 5:12 that Friday, we stood alone in the project room. I erased done, then not done. Only tomorrow remained. Victor watched me. You always leave that one for last. It's the one I trust least. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Victor said, you know I'm attracted to you. No clever response survived. Yes, and I'm attracted to you. Victor exhaled, almost a laugh. My contract was over. His authority was gone. Nothing professional remained between us. I stepped closer. Victor waited. I kissed him, briefly, deliberately, enough to answer one question and create several worse ones. His hand rested lightly at my side. Neither of us pretended it had been an accident. The next morning, at 8:14, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Hartwell Outdoor Group. Formal offer attached. It was better than I expected. That was the problem. If Hartwell had lowballed me, I could have rejected it with dignity and spent the weekend telling myself I had principles. Instead, they offered me a salary high enough to make Raleigh suddenly negotiable, a relocation package better than I would have requested, and authority over national launches instead of individual campaigns. I read the letter 3 times. Then I made the spreadsheet. Of course I did. Rent, taxes, moving, travel, benefits, retirement. I created a column called Personal Considerations, stared at it, then deleted it, because apparently I was 12 years old. Victor texted around 10. How bad is it? Annoyingly good. Congratulations. No hesitation. No attempt to disguise disappointment. I hated the word. I hated myself for hating it. We met that afternoon, because Northline was no longer a legitimate excuse to see each other. That should have felt like progress. Instead, I spent the first 10 minutes waiting for Victor to say something that would make the choice harder. He didn't. He asked about the team, the reporting structure, travel, authority, Morgan. He listened like someone genuinely invested in me, making the correct decision. Eventually, I put my glass down. You're very calm about this. Should I be performing distress? It would be validating. Beckett. What? What are you actually asking? There it was. I looked out the window. A dog had stopped halfway through the crosswalk and apparently rejected transportation as a concept. Do you think I should take it? Yes. Immediate again. You really need to work on suspense. You asked. I did. And I answered. Professionally. Victor's jaw tightened. Professionally. Yes. It is a better role than anything Northline can offer you. Better scope. Better resources. More authority. I know. You'd be excellent. I know that too. Then what are we doing? That's a very good question. Victor waited. If I take it, I move. Yes. To Atlanta. Yes. And you're acting like that fact has no relationship to what happened last night. Of course it does. Then explain the relationship. Victor looked down at the table. Not before you decide. The frustration arrived clean and immediate. Right. Beckett. No, I understand. I'm not sure you do. I think I understand perfectly. You're going to protect my freedom so aggressively that I'm not allowed to know what you want. That's not what I said. You didn't have to. I'm trying not to put pressure on a decision that affects your career. And I appreciate the ethics seminar. His expression hardened. Don't do that. Do what? Make responsibility sound cowardly. Because you don't like the answer. That stopped me. Because he was right enough to be infuriating. Victor softened his voice. You should take the job because you want it. Or reject it because you don't. Not because we kissed once after your contract ended. One kiss is a very efficient way to make a city inconvenient. That earned a small smile, but he didn't take the bait. I'm serious. So am I. The next 2 days were worse, because Victor gave me exactly the space he promised. No persuasive texts, no invitation disguised as logistics, no silence engineered to make me chase him. He checked once to ask whether Hartwell had clarified the bonus structure. I said yes. That was all. By Monday, I had run out of external reasons to delay, so I called Morgan. I accepted. The words felt surprisingly easy once I said them. She sounded pleased. We discussed start date, relocation, paperwork. At 11:23, I signed the electronic offer. For several minutes, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my own name. I expected regret. It didn't come. I wanted the job. That fact mattered. At 11:41, I texted Victor. I took it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, returned. Good. Then, I'm proud of you. That hurt. Not because it was wrong, because it was exactly right. We saw each other that evening. Something had changed before he arrived. The decision was done. The future had a city, and suddenly Victor was less guarded. That should have felt good. Instead, it made me suspicious. He asked when I was moving. 3 weeks. That's fast. They want me before the fall cycle starts. You'll be ready. You sound very sure. I am. The conversation drifted more easily than it had before. He told me Jamie once locked him out of their parents' house for 6 hours when they were teenagers. I told him I had been fired from a frozen yogurt shop at 19 because I told a customer the toppings bar looked unsanitary. Victor laughed hard enough to look away, and I understood. He was relaxed because my choice was finished, no longer vulnerable to his influence. That made the next question unavoidable. Did you want me to stay? Victor stopped smiling. There was no professional context left now, no pending offer, no decision he could alter. Yes. Simple. Quiet. The word went through me. How long have you known? Before the interview. I stared at him. Before you referred me. A pause. Yes. I looked away. Beckett. Give me a second. He did, which almost made it worse. I turned back. You wanted me here. Yes. You knew you were attracted to me. Yes. And you still sent my portfolio. Yes. I laughed once without humor. Victor's expression tightened. I thought you deserved the opportunity. That isn't the part I'm arguing with. I know. When were you planning to tell me you wanted me here? The answer came slowly. After you decided. There it was. Not cruelty, not manipulation. Something more difficult. A choice Victor had made on my behalf, while telling himself he was protecting mine. I sat back. Of course. Beckett. No. I understand now. I'm not sure you do. You made sure I had every piece of information, except the one that might have made you vulnerable. His face changed. That landed. He said, That's not fair. Maybe not. You know why I was careful. I know why you think you were careful. The space between us no longer felt romantic. It felt precise. Dangerously so. I stood before I said something designed only to hurt him. Victor stood too. Can we talk tomorrow? I almost said yes automatically. Then I thought of the whiteboard. Done. Not done. Tomorrow. For once, I didn't want to put the problem somewhere safe simply because the day was ending. Tomorrow isn't going to change what happened. No. Good. I picked up my jacket. Then tomorrow we can talk about why. And I left before either of us could turn the conversation into something easier. Victor came to my apartment the following evening, without assuming he could come inside. He stood in the hallway with his hands in his coat pockets. If you want me to leave, I will. I almost laughed. See? That. You make every sentence sound like informed consent for existing. His mouth tightened. Can I come in? I stepped aside. My apartment already looked like a place preparing to disappear. 2 boxes by the wall, flattened cardboard by the kitchen, 3 piles on the dining table. Atlanta. Donate. Decide later. Victor noticed. Of course he did. We sat across from each other. I'm not angry that you referred me. I know. I'm not angry you thought the job was good. He nodded. I'm not even angry you told me to take it. Victor waited. I'm angry because you decided which truths I was allowed to make that decision around. His eyes lifted to mine. I didn't hide the job. No. You hid yourself from it. That's different. Why? Because I was still the person who hired you when I made the referral. Because I knew I was attracted to you before your contract ended. Because I was your best friend's older brother. There were already too many ways for my opinion to carry more weight than it should. That's all true. I didn't want you staying in Raleigh 6 months from now, wondering whether you gave something up, because I made wanting you sound like an obligation. And I didn't ask you to make it an obligation. I know. No. You keep saying that after you've already made the choice. Victor's jaw tightened. What would you have had me do? Tell me the truth. And then what? Let me decide. You say that now because you took the job. That's convenient. It's not. It sounds convenient. His voice sharpened. Fine. You want the less careful version? Yes. You would have made me responsible either way. I stared at him. If I told you I wanted you here and you stayed, part of you would wonder whether you stayed for me. If I told you I wanted you here and you left, part of you would wonder whether leaving meant you failed me. You don't know that. I know you. You've known me for a month. I've known you for 12 years. As Jamie's friend. And for the last month as yourself. Victor looked around the apartment. You keep exits ready before anyone asks you to leave. He nodded toward the boxes. You accepted a permanent job and you're already packing like you might need to disappear from it. I'm moving. You know what I mean. I did. I hated that I did. Victor leaned forward. You want me to admit I should have told you. I should have. Once your contract ended, I should have. I kept using the professional boundary after the professional boundary was gone. That's the first thing you've said tonight that sounds like you. It's also not the whole problem. Of course not. You accepted Hartwell before you ever asked what I wanted. I laughed. You wouldn't tell me. You asked after you had the offer. Yes. You didn't ask before the interview. You were the one who sent my portfolio, with your permission, and then acted thrilled every time the process moved forward. Because I was thrilled. That's insane. No. I wanted two things. He stood. I wanted you here, and I wanted you to get the opportunity. I looked at him. You keep treating those as mutually exclusive, because if they aren't, then you have to own what you chose. I do own it. Do you? Yes. Then stop asking me to make the choice feel like a tragedy. That hit hard enough that I said nothing. Victor didn't soften it. You wanted me to ask you to stay. Yes. And if I had? I don't know. Exactly. His expression wasn't triumphant. It was tired. You wanted the question, because then staying would have meant love, and leaving would have meant sacrifice. Either way, the decision would have had a story bigger than, I wanted the job. Being accurately understood can feel almost indistinguishable from being attacked. I looked at him, and you waited until I couldn't reject the thing you wanted. Victor's face changed. You waited until I signed, because then, telling me you wanted me here was safe. I couldn't choose differently. I couldn't disappoint you. I couldn't make your desire inconvenient. He looked down. You call that fairness, because it sounds better than fear. Victor closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the anger was gone. So we're both cowards. Different departments. That almost made him smile. He rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. I'm sorry. I stayed quiet. No, he said. Let me say it without using it to end the conversation. I waited. I should have told you after the contract ended, and before you accepted. Not to make you stay. Not to make the decision harder. Just because you had the right to know what was true. That was the apology I had wanted. It fixed nothing. I should have asked before I needed the answer to prove something. Victor watched me. I wanted you to want me enough to make leaving complicated. I did. This time the words sounded sad instead of defensive. I looked around the apartment. 3 weeks earlier, Victor had been Jamie's older brother. 2 weeks earlier, he had become the man who stayed 10 minutes after work. A week earlier, I had kissed him. Now I was leaving. I still think Atlanta is right. Victor nodded. I do too. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not asking you to, and I don't want you to wait around for me. Are you asking for space? I think I'm asking us not to turn one kiss into a long-distance relationship because we're scared the alternative means it didn't matter. Victor considered that, then nodded. That sounds fair. Careful, you like that word too much. A small smile, real, but exhausted. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped. For what it's worth, I'm glad you took the job. And for what it's worth, I wish you'd hated it a little more. I did. Then he left. Atlanta was good. That surprised me. The job was difficult in ways I enjoyed. Morgan gave me authority and expected me to use it. My team argued well. The first major launch review went long because 3 departments were honest at the same time, which felt almost luxurious. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Midtown with terrible cabinet space and a view of another building's rooftop garden. I learned where to buy groceries, which train to take, which coffee shop looked crowded but moved fast. I did not spend every night thinking about Victor. That would have been easier. Instead, he appeared in specific places. At 5 o'clock when I reached for a marker, and there was no whiteboard divided into done, not done, tomorrow. When a manager agreed with me without needing credit. When somebody asked what I was doing over the weekend, and I gave them a real answer. We texted twice the first week, 3 times the second. Nothing dramatic. Jamie complained separately to both of us that our refusal to discuss each other was making him feel weirdly powerful and completely useless. I ignored him. On my 3rd Sunday in Atlanta, I finally opened the last moving box. Winter clothes, 2 framed photographs, kitchen knives I had forgotten I owned, a desk lamp, nothing important. That was what bothered me. I had left the box sealed for 20 days anyway. I sat on the floor and looked around. There were still no pictures on the walls. The books I used most were stacked horizontally because I had not bought shelves. My lease was 12 months. My employment contract had no end date, and I had arranged the apartment like someone waiting for permission to leave. Victor had been right. Not about Atlanta, about me. I kept reversibility close enough to touch. Then another truth arrived right behind it. I did not want to move back to Raleigh. I liked the job. I liked Atlanta more than I expected. I wanted to stay, and none of that made me want Victor less. For the first time, the two facts did not feel like enemies. Maybe the choice had never been Atlanta or Victor. Maybe the harder choice was whether I could want both, without using one as an excuse to run from the other. Victor called 2 nights later. Not texted, called. I was standing in my kitchen holding a screwdriver because I had finally bought bookshelves and discovered the manufacturer considered written instructions a sign of weakness. His name appeared on the screen. I answered, "Hey, hey." The silence was familiar now. Victor said, "Is this a bad time?" "I'm losing a fight with furniture." "That sounds serious. There are 17 identical screws, and one of them has betrayed me." He laughed. The sound reached me differently. Not because I missed Raleigh, because I missed him. "Beckett, I want to ask you something." I sat down. "Okay." "And I'm trying very hard not to wait until I know what you'll say." There it was. Not another apology. Behavior. "I'm listening." Victor took a breath. "I want to try this. This, you and me, plainly. No professional language. No effort to make his desire smaller before handing it to me. I don't mean you moving back. I don't mean you leaving Hartwell. I don't even mean pretending 400 miles is convenient." I stayed quiet. "I mean, I want to date you. Long distance, if that's what the geography requires. Planned weekends. Calls because we want them. I want to find out whether this is worth the inconvenience." I smiled. "That is the least romantic proposal I've ever received." "I had a spreadsheet." "Of course you did." I deleted it. That made me laugh. Victor's voice softened. "I'm serious. I know. I don't know whether long distance works for us." "Neither do I. I don't know whether one of us eventually moves." "Good. Good? Yes. Keep going." He paused. "I don't want to solve the next 3 years tonight. I want to know whether you want the next 3 months. 3 months. Specific. Finite enough to be real. Long enough to require effort. Exactly the kind of future I usually avoided by calling uncertainty freedom. And if I say no?" Victor did not answer immediately. Then I still wanted you. I waited, and you got to know that before you decided." I closed my eyes. That was it. The thing he had failed to do before Atlanta. He was doing it now, giving me his truth while the answer was still dangerous. "I'll be disappointed," he said. "I'll probably complain to Jamie until he regrets introducing us. But I won't decide you made the wrong choice, because it isn't the one I want. You've thought about this." "Constantly." "Good. Good? Very." Another silence. This one belonged to me. I looked around my apartment. The last box was open. My books were waiting to be put somewhere permanent enough to require a screwdriver. My new job was mine, because I wanted it. Atlanta was mine because I chose it. Victor did not need to become an alternative to either. He could simply become another choice. "Yes." Victor said nothing. "You still there?" "Yes." "You sound alarmed." I had prepared for a longer deliberation. "I've been deliberating for a month." "Fair. Dangerous word." "Right." I set the screwdriver on the counter. "Yes, Victor. I want to try." The silence changed. I could hear his smile before he spoke. "Okay. That's all?" "No." "Good. I miss you." The words were simple enough to hurt. "I miss you too. And I want to see you." There he is. What? Victor Rhodes expressing a preference before the outcome is guaranteed. Don't make it weird. It's already weird. Then we negotiated. Not forever. Calendars. I had a launch review in 2 weeks. Victor had quarterly planning the weekend after. He suggested coming to Atlanta first. I said I wanted my first trip back to Raleigh instead. Why? Because leaving wasn't the problem. I want to know I can go back without treating it like reversing my decision. A pause. Okay. No argument? I'm learning. We chose the 3rd weekend. Friday night through Sunday afternoon. No Jamie. No Northline. No pretending it was anything except a visit because we were dating. Dating felt strange enough that I said it aloud after we hung up. Then again, just to hear whether it sounded like a plan or a trap. It sounded like neither. It sounded like something I had agreed to. The next 3 weeks were not cinematic. They were practical, which turned out to be better. Victor called Tuesday because he wanted to hear my voice. I called Thursday because Morgan approved a production change I had been fighting for, and Victor was the person I wanted to tell. One night we talked 11 minutes because we were both tired. Another night we stayed on the phone almost 2 hours, arguing about whether frozen pizza counted as cooking. We did not perform intimacy every day to prove the relationship was alive. That mattered. So did our first disagreement. Victor suggested moving our Raleigh weekend because his team scheduled a late Friday review. I stared at the message. Old me would have answered fine immediately. Flexible. Easy. No problem. Instead, I called him. I can't move it. Victor paused. Okay. I have client work the following weekend. Then I'll move the review. You don't have to. I know. The phrase had changed. I can delegate the last hour. I suggested moving the weekend because it was easier for me. You said no, so I'm solving my part. I smiled. This is suspiciously functional. Don't ruin it. I'm trying. Friday afternoon, I took the train from Atlanta with an overnight bag and more nerves than luggage. Victor was waiting at the station. No sign, no flowers, no theatrical run toward each other. He saw me. I saw him, and both of us smiled in a way that made the distance between us suddenly ridiculous. Victor walked toward me and stopped close enough that I could decide the rest. I kissed him. Not because a contract ended, not because a job had been accepted, not because somebody was leaving, because I had come back for the weekend and wanted to kiss the man waiting for me. His hand settled against my waist. When we separated, he said, "Hi." Strong opening. I had better material planned. Nerves? Apparently, that pleased me more than it should have. The weekend was ordinary. Dinner, a walk, breakfast too late to be called breakfast. We disagreed about a movie and watched neither option. I saw Victor's townhouse for the first time as somewhere he lived rather than somewhere Jamie's older brother lived. There were too many plants. He claimed they were low maintenance. Half of them looked emotionally demanding. Sunday morning, Victor realized he had left a portfolio folder at Northline that he needed Monday. The office was empty when we stopped by. Walking through it felt stranger than I expected. The project room was exactly where I remembered it, except the whiteboard had been cleaned. No done, no not done, no tomorrow. Victor found the folder while I stood staring at the blank surface. Then he came back holding a marker. "You look disappointed. I spent 30 days emotionally damaging that board." He held the marker out. "Fix it." I uncapped it. For a moment, I almost recreated all 3 headings. Instead, I wrote one word: tomorrow. Victor stood beside me. "Work?" "No." I wrote the date of our next visit beneath it. Atlanta this time. Victor read it, then looked at me. "Good." I capped the marker. Months earlier, tomorrow had been where I put anything I wasn't ready to deal with yet. Another client, another city, another exit. Victor never cured me of wanting options. I never cured him of thinking carefully before he spoke. That was not what love did. It gave us somewhere to put those habits where they could be questioned instead of obeyed. Victor set the marker on the tray. "Ready?" I looked once more at the date on the board, then at him. Yeah, tomorrow used to be the part I kept flexible enough to escape. With Victor, it became something I was willing to schedule.